My name is Jamin. I'm your first friend in Alaska. I'm an associate real estate broker in South Central Alaska. Today, we're going to be talking about what's going on in the real estate market in Eagle River, looking at the single-family homes, the condos, and the multifamily market. This is a small but mighty market, and it never is a boring market, never a boring update here for Eagle River, just because the smaller markets do allow for kind of some big drastic changes in one way or the other. So we'll be taking a look at that today. Before we get started though, give this video a like, subscribe, and do all the good stuff so the algorithm knows that this channel is blessed, and let's jump into it. First thing we're going to look at for the single family market is what's going on in the inventory. This time last year, there were 61 properties available in Eagle River, so not a whole lot of inventory there. Now it's up at a incredibly groundbreaking 67 properties available on the market. Not a whole lot of inventory. When we look historically, we would expect to see anywhere from about 160 to about 200 single-family homes available on the market. Historically, we're pretty low. We're at about a third of where we normally are. Next thing we see is the number of properties that are actually sold went from 52 this time last year to 39 this year. So seeing a bit of a decrease there. Looking historically, it still kind of looks down historically. I think by the time we start getting such a compressed inventory, what's left and what people are willing to sell are not necessarily the properties that everyone's excited to purchase. So I think that's kind of the reason we're kind of seeing a compressing of those numbers. But let's drop your comment down below. I'm still seeing Eagle River is still quite desirable. And for the properties lately that, we go and help buyers try to make an offer on, it's still quite competitive. So I think you're kind of getting to the point where there's just such a small inventory, it is going to start showing up in the number of properties that are actually selling because there's just not a whole lot available. Okay, this time last year, I was talking about how this was the first time in Eagle River's history year to date where we were over $500,000. Wasn't really sure if it was going to, maintain at that level, and it definitely did. Okay, so what we're seeing is the average sold price went from $500,000 this time last year to $539,000 this year, which means we're seeing about a 7.7 increase for the average sold price in Eagle River. Now, that's definitely increasing for the average sold price in a big way here in Eagle River. So you can see that there's still a lot of demand for properties in Eagle River. I think what we're seeing is just the properties that are coming onto the market are probably just at a higher price point than what we see overall for the area, because people who are in kind of that middle of the road, we'll say like middle class or so. I know that's kind of a morpheus, nebulous definition of middle class, but a lot of folks that are, more or less middle class, we see a lot of them are not really wanting to sell because a lot of them purchased in 2020, 2021. They've got those low interest rates, and that's a big deal for them. And it's going to be a lot more expensive if they sell and go buy something else. So they're holding on to what they have. So what's happening, I believe, is we're seeing a lot more inventory come onto the market that is, the higher price points where, it's not nothing. If you have like, the interest rates go up for these folks when they're in the much higher price points, but it's not as important. So they're more willing to sell, even if they're going to be giving up a low interest rate, or, maybe they just bought it all in cash. You just don't know. So I think that's a big contributing factor here. I do believe that the appreciation, once we start peeling back and factoring in these variables, has gone up pretty healthily in Eagle River. I don't know if it's gone up by about 7.7%. That seems a little aggressive. I think it has more to do with the fact of what's actually on the market as opposed to how much the overall market has improved. All right, switching gears real quick, let's take a look at what's going on in the condo market. So the condo market went from 7 condos available this time last year to 11 this year, which normally we'd see anywhere from about 30 upwards of about 40 condos available. So not a whole lot available as far as the condo market in Eagle River. Next, we see the number of condos that have actually sold went from 13 this time last year to 14 this year. And really, that's about normal. You'd see anywhere from 7 to about 12 condos selling prior to COVID. So the fact that we're seeing 14, is kind of indicative of how in demand condos are, even though the inventory is not particularly hopping at the moment. Next, we see the average sold price for condos in Eagle River went from about $319,000 this time last year to about $338,000 this year, which means we're sitting at about a 6% increase for the appreciation for condos in Eagle River. Now, again, I really believe that one of the big variables here is you just have to look at what kind of condos are coming onto the market to see that kind of increase in appreciation. I think for the folks that the interest rates are really going to make a big deal, they're not moving at all until interest rates come down. And so that's usually the folks that are going to be in kind of the lower price condos, whereas kind of the newer stuff out there that's coming onto the market, probably a little wealthier, and it just doesn't make that big of an impact for them, so they're willing to sell still in a couple of years. And I have no doubt that the appreciation is still going up for condos in Eagle River because it's a desirable area. Got lots of videos talking about why Eagle River is a desirable location for a lot of people. But I don't know if it's gone up by, that 6%. That seems a little aggressive. I could be wrong, but I don't think across the board it's necessarily done that. I think once you start pulling back those layers and factoring in okay, what kind of condos are selling, I think becomes a little less aggressive, I guess, at that point. All right, break time. For those of you who've been watching for a bit, I have a relocation guide for people who are moving to Alaska. If you'd like your copy, feel free to go to my website. The link is in the description section down below. Put relocation guide in the comment section, and I'll make sure to send that your way. Okay, let's go and finish up today's market update, looking at the multifamily market. I'm going to be honest, there are times where I'm not even sure I want to cover the multifamily market in Eagle River just because it's so streaky and it's kind of a smaller market and you just never know. It's hard looking at the data and knowing if it's, a real honest to God multifamily property or if it's just some weird gerrymandered single family property and they're considering it a duplex. And so they say it's multifamily. You just don't know, but we're going to jump into it anyway. This time last year, there were 3 multifamily properties available on the market, and this year there are 3 multifamily properties available on the market. Looking at the number of multifamily properties that have actually sold, this time last year there were 0, and this year there are 1 multifamily properties that sold. All right, get your popcorn ready. This is really where things get interesting. So this time last year, average sold price for a multifamily property was right at about $1 million, and this year it's right at about $501,000. So that looks like a huge precipitous drop. And keep in mind, smaller market. I think this time last year we had a large commercial property that sold, and so that just kind of threw all of our numbers off. So really what I'm doing is looking at the previous year to kind of get a comparison. So this time of year last year in 2023, average sold price was right around $429,000. Year before then, 2022, was about $606,000. So I mean, it's just all over the place. And it really comes down to the specific property that's available. When you're talking about just a handful of multifamily properties that are even available in Eagle River, it's hard to get any kind of apples to apples comparison or get any kind of statistical analysis when the sample size is so small. What I will say though, multifamily properties are very desirable in Eagle River because everybody wants to live here, and it's known as kind of a low cap rate area. In other words, it's known as one of those areas where there's no such thing as mailbox money, but you're going to have less headache probably with having a multifamily property in Eagle River than you're going to have with properties in other parts of town. You're not going to get as high of a return, but you're also going to get less of a headache. So that's the reason that multifamily properties are very desirable here in Eagle River, and they're probably going to continue going up. We do have multifamily here. The problem is, though, the owners, the landlords, once they get it, they don't really want to let go unless they absolutely have to. All right, for the summary here, let's talk about kind of the takeaways if I'm a buyer, seller, or investor. If I'm a buyer, I'm looking at this market and it's competitive, okay? If you're wanting to jump in at kind of the entry level, you need to either have a lot of money or you need to have a lot of patience and persistence. Okay, this is, it's competitive, especially in that price range that we're talking about, kind of that beginner kind of price range. Unfortunately, that's right around like $400,000 now. And, it's competitive. Like, I helped someone purchase a property just a little bit ago. It took us like 7 months to find something in Eagle River, and took a lot of persistence. And, to her credit, I mean, a lot of persistence, a lot of patience. And I think we made like 10 offers on different properties, and it was competitive every time. There was a property that was off market that we made an offer for that we were already competing with someone for, even though it wasn't even on the market yet. So I say that to say, if you're wanting to purchase a property in Eagle River, just make sure you're like mentally ready for that, and it's not something where you have to like buy immediately. If it is something you have to buy immediately, then we're gonna have to talk about some compromises you're probably gonna have to make in order to define something in that short timeline. If I'm a seller, good market to be in. You just don't want to overplay your hand because properties are still sitting on the market a little bit longer. And if you're not priced correctly, people are just probably not going to give you a second look. And honestly, that's kind of your fault. I'm just going to call a spade a spade. If you manage in one of the better sellers market we've had in decades to still not sell your home, like what more advantages could you possibly have asked for and still mess it up? So if you're looking at making that move and trying to make sure you're not doing that, give me a call and let's talk and see how I can help you. Okay, multifamily properties. For my investors out there, big thing you want to do is just make sure that you are keeping enough money socked away that you can take care of the inevitable repairs that are going to come up for the property. It is mind-boggling to me the number of investors I talk to where they buy these multifamily properties and they have next to nothing set aside for when the repairs happen. They just get the monthly rents and all that, they pay the mortgage, and they just pocket whatever is left over. You want to keep a big war chest just set aside so when inevitably the water heater goes out, or you get 2 fridges you suddenly have to replace, or you have a phantom leak at the property, or you have another leak at the property that's been happening since 2018, and now you're having to like structurally take things apart and like reinforce everything. Not that I have personal experience with any of these things, of course, but you need to be able to just pay for that stuff on a dime and not really be stressing about it because that's what your tenants rely on you to do. I've talked a lot here. The big thing I'm also going to say, the inventory is probably not going to be going up anytime soon. Not to the levels like what we saw back in, prior to COVID. What I think we're probably going to see happen is if we do get into a situation where the interest rates do come down to around 5 something, I think we start to see more demand for properties, and we might start seeing some more sellers willing to sell because they've been used to like 6 point something for a while. 5 starts to get a little easier for people to digest. And I think you start seeing more sellers willing to put their homes on the market. Whether or not that's really going to solve the inventory problem, I really don't know, because if you get a seller that's selling a house, but they're also buying a house, that's kind of a net neutral, really, for the inventory that's available. I think it will help, and I'm not sure if it's really going to make that huge of a difference. Big thing right now, there's a lot of speculation. Just know that the only 2 things that matter when you're talking about real estate, and specifically the stats and what's happening in the market, is what is going on with supply and what is happening in demand. I know there's a lot of people out there, they're really insistent. They found like this one variable, this one statistical thing where once this trips over this and that indicates there's going to be a big crash or whatever. If it does not impact supply or it does not impact demand, it is irrelevant. Okay? Full stop. Only thing that matters, supply, demand. Okay? Keep focused on that and you're going to be okay. Another way you're going to be okay is just reach out to me. Let's talk and see how I can help you. Okay. Got that in. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for hanging out. We'll catch you next time.